So just write this down. We're just going to write down some phrases, and then at the end of class, I think we'll be able to get through all these notes, but I think at the end of class, I'm going to give you guys an assignment. It's just 6 questions. The questions are directly from the notes, okay? So yesterday we talked about physics, but really we should talk about the broader science, or not yesterday, last time we met. And we explained how physics is kind of the fundamental root of science. Actually, no, we didn't. Actually, we just went over the syllabus. So we're going to go over this today. So science is a system of knowledge and the methods used to find the knowledge. Okay? It's a system. The scientific method is basically what scientists do. Now, they don't follow a chart. Honestly, they don't. But when you follow that chart as closely as you can, you do science. All right? So how does it start? You start with an observation. You see something. You go, I wonder why that works that way. So Sir Isaac Newton, story is, apple hit him on the head. We don't know if it's an apple, but something hit him. And he goes, you know what I've noticed in my lifetime? Everything that goes up must fall down. Why is that? And then he started asking questions. Then he started doing little experiments to find the questions. Then he invented calculus to get the precise mathematical measurements he desired. I don't think he invented it as much as he discovered it. But he published a book on it. And a lot of the stuff that he did was build upon other people. So Einstein does a similar thing. He sees something in Newtonian physics and is like, that doesn't work. And so then he started to develop his own theory, special relativity, or general relativity. Well, it's relativity. It's relative. See what I did there? All right. Did everybody have that written down, by the way? All right. So then all science begins with curiosity and often ends in discovery. One of the funniest things about science is even if your hypothesis is absolutely wrong, you still learn something. You still learn something. In fact, some of the greatest scientific discoveries were mistakes. Something happens. I'll share a quick story. I was at the University of Notre Dame doing research one summer, and there was a guy that was just doing characterizations of ionic liquids. And what that means is he was just zapping these liquids with electricity to see what they do, to figure out their electric conductivity. And one of the ionic liquids, when he zapped it a little bit, the liquid changed and had like little crystallized particles that fell to the bottom of the tube. And then they were like, whoa, we discovered something. And so that opened up a whole nother lane of research. What are these particles? Why is it that this ionic liquid had these little tiny particles drop out of it when you zap it with electricity? And so they never intended to see, but it's still curiosity. I wonder why this did this. And then you just go down that rabbit hole, okay? So it begins with curiosity, ends in discovery. Observations can be qualitative or quantitative. Chlorophyll in a plant, chlorophyll is green, so most plants have some sort of green leaf on them because that's how they do photosynthesis. Okay? Even very pretty flowers, somewhere on there, they have something green. Now, there are other plants, but most of them have chlorophyll. That's qualitative. It's green. Now, if I say how many species of plants have green chlorophyll in them, that's quantitative. I'm measuring, I'm counting. Quantitative is counting, qualitative is just looking at stuff. Now, ideally, we like to quantify as many things as we can in science. So if I say, I want to know how many students here at the high school like pizza bagels. Well, I could walk around the school and say, hey, what do you think of pizza bagels? And they're like, oh, they're good. They're okay. Hey, what do you like about pizza bagels? Who like? And I go around and I talk to every kid in the school. And they say, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Well, that is just, it's not really qualitative, but it's not quantitative, right? I have to put exact, precise numbers. So on those surveys where 0 is like, I hate it, and 5 is like, I love it, and I say, how would you score it? That's very quantitative, right? So pizza bagels, and then I would say, well, 37% of the high school likes pizza bagels. That's quantitative. But if I say, 32% rank it as a 5, that's a little more quantitative. Qualitative might just be, it's okay. Like, we're not really putting a number to it, okay? And that's something that's very subtle, but it makes a difference. Scientific knowledge is discovered, and it can be applied in ways that improve the lives of people. So my first year doing research at Notre Dame, I did a thing with thermal rectifiers, and without going into all the little details, because that's kind of a side note. Basically, it's like a heat wicking concept. In other words, it takes heat away from an object. And it was for aerospace, and that was a long time ago. That was like 12 years ago. And the professor that I worked with on that, and what I did was very small. I just figured out the thermal conductivities of carbon nanotubes and stuff. But 10 years later, NASA uses it. So there's a thing for satellites that are in space. How do they get their power? Solar power. They have solar panels. The problem with solar panels, they get really, really hot. Why? Because there's usually the sun beating down on them, and they're usually a dark color in nature. And so when they get really hot, they don't produce as much electricity. And so because they don't produce as much electricity, it kind of, it's not good. So if there was a way that you could cool them off, you could avoid that whole scenario. So one little thing that I measured got measured again, and then they said, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? How about if we do this? Could we do this? Could we do this? And now NASA has something. Now, I wasn't the only person to do that. Quite honestly, I think, I feel like Harvard or MIT, I think it was MIT did it first, and then Notre Dame, they were curious, but the first step in the process of trying to discover something, we have to be able to replicate what somebody else does. Technology. Use of knowledge to solve problems. Your cell phones. It's funny because I was born before cell phones, and so I had a phone in my house. It wasn't cordless, it wasn't wireless, there was a cord, and that cord was connected to a hub. The telephone poles are called telephone poles because they were wires that ran to every house. And inside your house, that wire was connected to a phone that had a cord on it. And when you called somebody, originally a person would pick up the phone and you'd say, yes, please dial this number. And they would just literally connect the wires. So if you ever watch one of those old movies where they're plugging in the wires and stuff, and those were the telephone operators. Eventually, when computers came out, the computers could do that. And then, well, what if somebody's out and about? How do you get in touch with them? Well, then they had these radio frequency pagers, but you could, and it was literally a walkie-talkie. So you would call a number, computer would pick up, and it would say, please say your message in 30 seconds. Beep. And then you would say, please call me, this is so-and-so, call me at this number, and the pager would go off and it would say that. Then eventually they figured out a way to do just the phone number. So then pagers or beepers, you could type in the phone number that you want somebody to call you back at. And then eventually they said, well, it wouldn't be too hard to be able to text message. And they're like, okay, but wouldn't it be great, because we still had to call on a phone. that was connected to a line. And then also inside the houses, they started to make these cordless phones. So you did, because you had to literally stand by the wall to talk on the phone. And then somebody else says, well, what if we could just make a phone? Well, you'd have to put towers. Well, how would that work? Well, they'd have to be within this, you'd almost have to have these cells. That's the way it would work, because you have to broadcast like a wireless signal or something. And so the first cell phones, you couldn't text message, and all these different technologies were developing at the same time. And the first iPhone kind of merged everything together. And then the first iPhone was the first smartphone, well, successful one, where you can actually go on the internet. So Steve Jobs, because he was from Macintosh, he actually said, what if I could take this computer and put it in this phone? And that's how the iPhones that you guys use, well, Androids too, but that's how it developed over time. But there was science behind developing these technologies. So science and technology are interdependent. Advance in one will lead to an advance in the other. So I told that story because look what happened. Well, Alexander Graham Bell said if I connect a wire and I use these two devices, I could talk to somebody that's far away in the other room and they could talk to me. Then the next person came along, and if you fast forward to Steve Jobs, he's like, oh, what if I put the phone and music, because he liked music. So he developed an iPod, and then he put the messages on an iPod, and he said, well, we'll just connect this to a phone. And he said, I'm going to make the screen so you could touch the screen with your finger. And it's almost like the mouse on a computer. And so there were things they had to do. They had to figure out the coding. They had to figure out how to make the screen. They had to figure out what materials would work best. So researchers would try different materials. Programmers would try different types of code. That's why computer science is a science. Okay. So one advance and the other leads to the other. So what branches or sub-branches of science do you see? I was supposed to show a video. Just write down these different branches. I think psychology, child psychology, physics, computer science. Now, I'll tell you about the robot. There's a video. I'm not going to show you the video because I don't want to take up too much time. We have a limited amount of time. But she made a robot teddy bear. And I'll show you the picture as soon as you're done writing this down. And it responded to you. It would talk to you. If you hugged it, it would say, oh, that feels nice. Stuff like that. So if you were a little kid and you said, it's advanced for its time. It would ask questions, right? Why are you sad? And then the little kid, because it was a teddy bear and it was smaller than the child and it wasn't an adult, wasn't intimidated by the teddy bear. And the child would just say, well, I'm sad because of this, or I don't feel good about that, or, it was really used for child psychology. Okay. Does everybody have those written down? So there it is. Okay. And it's just a robotic companion. This was done a long time, about 2005. Okay. It was huggable. The body of the teddy bear it was full of body sensitive skin. It could tell when it was being hugged. It could tell when it was being petted. It was also able to connect to the internet. And then the eyeballs were literally cameras. So whatever the robot or the teddy bear could see, they could see. So they could see the facial expressions of the young children that interacted with it. Having the companion was beneficial to the kids. Okay, but it wasn't like an actual pet. I mean, it was more like a pet than a toy. But you didn't have to feed it. You didn't have to take it for walks. So from a little child that have a teddy bear, that can interact with you. It didn't carry diseases, stuff like that. So that was developed based on science. Child psychology. How do you help a child develop? Okay. So now physical science, that's what we're doing. ICP is all about physical science. We separate it into two parts. The C stands for chemistry. The P stands for physics. And they say it's the study of non-living things. And for the most part, that's true. But there's physics behind your bodies, human beings. When I do this with my fingers, my brain sends an electrical signal to the muscles through my nervous system. And it makes the muscles contract. And then when I don't send the signal, my arm relaxes. I go this way, I go this way, and if I just relax. So that's all done by my brain and electrical signals. Electricity and electrical stuff, that's physics. But there's chemistry involved too. So there's very specific tissues. It goes through your nervous system, and your tissues in your nervous system have different chemical compositions than your skin. They have different chemical compositions than your heart. So the human body is really like fascinating when you think of all the different systems it has and how they work. And they're complicated, but they're also elegant and simple. So physics studies planets. We also study molecules. Chemistry studies molecules mostly, but if you put a bunch of molecules and atoms together, you make different things. So that's why they label it as non-living things. Now, don't write the stuff crossed out. When you say Earth space science, people think, they think in terms of like studying the planets, right? That's kind of true. But really, it's more about the geology of Earth. How old is the Earth? What are the different the different layers? I just went to Arizona. What's beautiful about Arizona is you can see the different layers in the geology. I went to the Grand Canyon, and each different color is a different layer of sediment. It's pretty cool. Now, from Earth's perspective, we have to study a little astronomy. The Earth does orbit around the sun. We do have a moon. The moon has an impact on our high tide, low tide, the ocean's tides, stuff like that. Okay? But we're not studying Pluto in an Earth space science. We might recognize that Pluto is way out there, but we're not really studying the aspects of Pluto. We might mention it. But. Now, life, anything that's a living thing, that's biology. You know this? Well, write it down. You know I graded the notes, right? Yeah. Write it down. Write it down. Write it down. Your homework is literally writing down this stuff, word for word. Okay. So biology is the study of living things. That's it. Now, physics, it talks about what makes up atoms and molecules. Chemistry says what happens if we arrange these atoms and molecules in a certain way. Biology says that a plant has chlorophyll. So think of chlorophyll. A plant is green. That's qualitative because of chlorophyll. So your biology teacher will teach you that chlorophyll helps the plant make food. And they'll even say that it gets the energy from the sun. Now, a chemist will literally tell you how many carbon, how many hydrogen, how many oxygen are in chlorophyll. They'll literally tell you what chlorophyll is made up of. Now, physics will say the sun generates this much energy. It takes 8 minutes for a photon of light to travel from the sun to the earth because we've measured the distance, and that's how long it takes a particle of light to travel to the earth. And by the way, the atoms of the molecules and elements in chlorophyll, they're constructed of smaller particles. And that chemical reaction of how the chlorophyll makes the thing, here's where the energy is used, here's how so much energy is lost. There's a very specific reason that it's green, because it absorbs all the other colors, and green is the only color that's reflected, because the other colors are what you need because of the frequency and energy levels required to start this chemical process. Okay. But biology just focuses on living things. All right. So I'm just going to skip to this. Well, read this. Don't write this down yet. Read this and tell me what you think it is. Science is a system of blank, and the blank used to find more knowledge. Technology is the use of scientific knowledge and to blank. Science and technology are blank. An advance in one leads to an advance in another. And I think you've already written these down, right? Okay. So, give me 2 seconds, and I will post your assignment.